One wrong command, docker rm-f flash db, and my entire Postgres DB is gone. This is the mistake that burns people working with Docker every day. Containers are ephemeral, which means if you delete them, all the data inside that database is gone. In this episode, I'll show you how to persist data with volumes, break it on purpose using a wrong bind mount, and then fix it right away. Stick till the end because losing production data is the last mistake you want to make as a DevOps engineer. If you are serious about learning Docker through real world simulations like this, hit subscribe right now. Every week we break things on purpose so you learn how to debug them like a pro. Before jumping into the demo, I would like to give you a small explanation. Here's what's exactly happening. Let me draw a quick container, small container. A container file system lives inside the container layer. When you delete the container with docker rm command, the writable layer disappears. That's why the data from our Postgres database is gone. To fix this, Docker gives us two options. Number one is named volumes managed by Docker, safe and reliable for databases. The second option is bind mounts, meaning we are going to map a folder which is on our host PC. Second option is flexible but risky if you point it to the wrong folder path. Now, the official Docker documentation goes into TMPFS mounts, storage, drivers, and more. We will keep it practical for real world DevOps. What matters is this: using number one, named volumes for databases, and the second option, we have to be careful with bind mounts. Now let's jump into the demo. So I'm back into my Visual Studio Code. So in this folder, I have episode 4 persistent volume. Here I have commands.sh file. So I'm going to follow one by one command and I'll also try to explain you. We are going to run database without volume. For this, I'm going to use this command docker run -d. Name would be db1, Postgres user, Postgres password, and the db name. Press enter. Our database is running. Followed by, we are going to insert some data into this database. I'm using docker execute command. -it is like interactive mode. db1 is like our container name. And I'm using PL/SQL command here to create table. If not exists, I'm going to create test table. Integer would be primary key and insert some values. Okay, press enter. I can see that insert 0, 1. We inserted some data. Now let me quickly restart this container. So for that, I'm going to use the container ID followed by docker restart the container. Press enter. So I did restart the container. Let's try to run another PL/SQL command. Select star from test. Press enter. So I can see some data. Restart did not affect anything with respect to data. Now I am going to remove that particular container. So I'm going to copy the container ID, then I would say docker stop container followed by docker rm container ID. Then if I try to run the same command once again, I get error response from daemon. No such container db1. So let me start the container once again. So I will use the same command. I'm going to rerun the container once again. Press enter. If we check that command, I get an error saying relation test does not exist. That means our data is gone because we are not using volumes. Now let's try to create some volumes. So for that, I am going to use docker volume create followed by the name pg data. Press enter. Now we have the volume created. Now let me run the docker container command once again. For that, I am using the docker run. For that, I am using docker run -d in detached mode, and the name I am giving it as database2. The same credentials, username, password, and the db name. Here, if you see, we are trying to add volume. Volume is, let's say, a flag, and the volume which we created, pg data. Also, within the container, we are saying to point out this data in this particular location. Okay, press enter. Now my container is running once again. Now let's try to insert data once again. Now let's try to insert data into the db2 database which we created. So I'm using once again the same command, docker execute db2 psql -u demo create table if not exists test insert into test values 2. Press enter. I did inserted. Now let me do docker ps. I'm going to copy this container ID and then say docker stop container ID followed by docker rm space container ID. Let me list that. My db3 is gone now. So I need to rerun the container. So I'm going to use the same command once again. Copy and paste it here. Enter. My container is once again running. Followed by, now I'm not going to insert any data. Let's try to check if we can access this data. Okay. Press enter. If you see, I did not insert any new data because we had volumes. In spite of removing the container, we can still access the data because we are using volumes here, pg data. That's the power of named volumes. They persist data independently of containers. Now let's run another simulation. In this case, I am going to run db3 now database, and in terms of volume, previously we used pg data. Now I am trying to use temp folder wrong path. I am trying to bind the mount path. For example, in this case, temp wrong path. Press enter. If you see, my container is, let's say, running, and let's try to insert some data. Let me copy this command real quick, and then I'm going to say db3 here. Rest all would be the same. Press enter. Let me real quick look at the container. So I'm going to copy the container ID, clear the screen, docker stop container ID, press enter, docker rm container ID, press enter. Now let's try to rerun the container using the same command. Followed by, I'm going to execute select star from command to check if we can see the data. My data is still there. Now let's try to run the docker container once again using the wrong bind mount. That means I am going to give my own data directory instead of volumes. I am going to pass the data directory from my local host machine, and let me try to run this real quick. So previously we created this volume path, for example pg data. Now I am directly passing this particular path instead of creating the volume. Let's do that real quick. Press enter. So I did create this, followed by let me insert some data real quick. So for that I'm going to use the same command once again, docker execute, followed by I would say db3 here. Press enter. We have some data here. Let's try to search that data real quick, and I am going to say db3 once again here. I can see some data here. Now once again I am going to rerun this container using the same docker run command. Instead of db-data, I am going to use db data. Okay, manual mistakes are mandatory. It might happen for some or the other reason, but that's for sure. Now let's try to rerun the docker db3 container. If you look at the volume, previously we had temp db-data. Now I'm going to remove this hyphen and try to start this container. For some or the other reasons, we have to restart the container, and a developer is playing around with this stuff. And he tries to restart the container. Container started successfully. Now, if we look at the data, I'm going to execute real quick. If we look at the data, select star from test, the data is gone. Why? Because you are using the wrong path. And you will be in a panic situation. This is the danger of bind mounts. One wrong folder and your database won't even start. This is the danger of this particular volumes if we give our own host path. DB data, it will try to recreate the new database, and we cannot even find our data which we inserted or created in previous steps. Now let's try to quickly fix that issue. I'm going to say docker rm-db3, followed by we are going to use pg data. Once again pg data, press enter. Now if we look at the select statement in the db3, I can see the data is still present. The fix here is going back to named volumes. They are managed by docker, portable, and much safer than bind mounts for database. Let's do a quick recap of today's episode. Containers are ephemerals. If you delete them, data is gone. Named volumes are the best way to persist databases in Docker. Bind mounts are powerful but dangerous if you mount the wrong path, as we have seen in the demo. For 90% of real world setups, just stick with named volumes. In the next episode, we will deal with a very different failure, a container that refuses to stay alive. You will see how to debug a container stuck in a crash loop using Docker logs and Docker execute. If this helped you, hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, and drop a comment. Have you ever lost data in Docker because of missing volumes? Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.